US President Donald Trump has slammed the tariff ruling wherein the US Supreme Court has struck down US President Trump's tariffs, calling them illegal. US President Trump says that the Supreme Court ruling is deeply disappointing and has also imposed a global 10% tariffs on all countries with immediate effect. Let's listen in to what US President Trump had to say.
The Supreme Court's ruling on tariffs is deeply disappointing, and I'm ashamed of certain members of the court, absolutely ashamed, for not having the courage to do what's right for our country. I'd like to thank and congratulate Justices Thomas, Alito, and Kavanaugh for their strength and wisdom and love of our country, which is right now very proud of those justices. When you read the dissenting opinions, there's no way that anyone can argue against them. There's no way. Foreign countries that have been ripping us off for years are ecstatic. They're so happy. And they're dancing in the streets, but they won't be dancing for long, that I can assure you. We can use other of the statutes, other of the tariff authorities, which have also been confirmed and are fully allowed. Therefore, effective immediately, all national security tariffs under Section 232 and existing Section 301 tariffs, they're existing, they're there, remain in place, fully in place, and in full force and effect. Today, I will sign an order to impose a 10% global tariff under Section 122, over and above our normal tariffs already being charged.
He's unhinged. Donald Trump is increasingly unhinged. Even his hand-picked Supreme Court said what he was doing was lawless. The tariffs were illegal from day one. A tax increase on ranchers, on farmers, on small businesses, on you and me. Donald Trump should return that money immediately. He has an obligation, $1,751 per family, that were taxed by Donald Trump. Pay us back. Put that money back in the pockets of working families and the American people.
The Supreme Court just confirmed what we already knew. Trump's tariffs are illegal. He did it without the support of Congress or the voters, and you paid the price. He illegally took $1,700 from every American family. That's a tax on working people. Donald Trump now owes you a refund for every dollar of it. America's working families deserve a refund. Cut the check, Donald.
So in announcing his new temporary 10% tariffs, US President Trump essentially became the first US president to invoke Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974, which allows presidents to levy tariffs of up to 15% but these are temporary tariffs which will only be allowed to be imposed for 150 days. So we have Aditya Rajkol joining us on the broadcast to help us decode these fresh 10% tariffs that have been imposed on across the globe, but US President Trump at the same time made it clear that these will not be imposed on India. Take us through it, Aditya.
Now, Donald Trump yet again has imposed tariffs against all the countries that were existing. In fact, not just that, this has been done under the sections of 301 and 232 under the national security provisions and sections, and an additional tariff of 10% has been imposed. This is over and above the tariffs that were only existing till now. This is in fact a new policy that has been adopted under the Section 122 that Trump has signed just a few hours ago. And clearly there's a huge showdown in the United States between the US Supreme Court and Donald Trump. The US President Donald Trump hit out at the US Supreme Court judges and in fact said that he's not going to lie low on the situation and the tariff policy is only going to continue. In fact, Ambassador Greer, the US trade representative, echoed Trump and said that there are several other provisions that the US administration, the Trump administration, has currently that will certainly continue the global tariffs policy. As of now, the new tariffs, the illegal tariffs will continue by the Trump administration. It's certainly not a good news that was being expected after the Supreme Court ruling. It could have been a sigh of relief, but that was only momentarily. A new tariff policy has been adopted under new sections now. Will that be again challenged in the Supreme Court? Only time will tell.
US President Donald Trump's tariffs have taken a new trajectory hours after the US top court scrapped tariffs imposed by US President Trump. Now he added an extra 10% global tariffs. He's also said that the trade deal with India will remain unchanged. During the press conference, US President Trump stated that his relationship with India is fantastic and that Prime Minister Modi is a good friend with him. He has also said that the trade deal with India will remain intact. Now, as a response to the ruling by the US Supreme Court, US President Trump has announced an additional 10% tariffs globally, launching a scathing attack on the US Supreme Court. Trump said that the justices are disgraced and disloyal to the nation. Now, US Supreme Court has ruled that the president is not authorized to unilaterally impose the tariffs, saying that such powers rest with Congress. Now, the court also termed the so-called reciprocal duties unlawful. However, Trump has pushed back, insisting that all existing tariffs will remain in full effect, announcing an additional 10% levy and vowing to explore alternative ways to enforce his trade policy. Now, joining us on the broadcast is Chief Market Economist Peter Cardillo. Peter, thank you for joining us so early in the morning here in India. Peter, my first question to you is, a lot of people are seeing this as a major setback for US President Trump and his sweeping unchecked powers that we've been seeing him imposing the tariffs and various other executive orders over the last 18 months. How do you decode this?
Well, let's say that the Supreme Court did give a blow to President Trump. There's no question about that. And all they did was enact the law. I mean, that was the law. So, they just said, you didn't have the right to impose those reciprocal tariffs. Now, the question is, how will that money be returned? And I guess that's, something that's probably going to fall in the laps of the courts. And as President Trump said during his conference, that we could be tied up for 5 years. I'm not sure. I'm not a legal expert on that, but I don't think it's going to be that very soon. And then, of course, he just a while ago signed the 10% levy on all nations, but there's a catch to that, and that is he's basing it on the trade deficit, which is legal, but there's a catch to that, and that catch is that it's only valid for 90 days. After that, he has to go to Congress, and there's a good possibility that Congress may not uphold this 10% global tax. And so that brings us back to where we were at the beginning of the enacting of tariffs in general. The question is about the money. Does he have to return it? And if he does,
right, Peter,
where does the money come from?
That's exactly what I wanted to come to you next, because so far we know that the US has collected roughly $175 billion in tariff revenue in the last 18 months or so. But can we expect the US government now being forced to refund this money that has been collected?
Well, I just said, it's going to take a while. I don't know, how long it's going to take. It's probably going to be a battle in the courts, and that could take years. On the other hand, if it goes back to the Supreme Court, it'll take time, but perhaps not as much as time. And they may have to make a decision on it. I'm not sure.
So the legal showdown essentially between US President Trump and the Supreme Court is far from over. My last question to you is that we saw the US markets are fairly steady now after the Supreme Court hearing and US President Trump's now 10% tariffs. But how do you see other markets across the world reacting to now fresh trade uncertainty?
Well, I think it's going to be a positive reaction like it was here in the States. And the reason for that is that, well, here in the States, it was positive because I think the market was betting on lower inflation. If these tariffs are going to be rolled back, and we don't, and the 10% global tariff only lasts for 90 days, and Congress doesn't extend it, that means we should see a relief in inflation, and that should give wiggling room to the Federal Reserve to lower rates. And
Right, Peter.
As far as the world markets are concerned, well, if the 10% global tariff expires without being extended, that's less money that they have to forfeit, and that's
Right.
good news for them.
So we can definitely expect a lot of uncertainty and volatility when it comes to trade policy in the next couple of years. Peter Cardillo, Chief Market Economist for Spartan Capital, thank you so much for joining us on this broadcast.